Yeah.
Super. Let me share the screen and I will start with the introduction if you don't mind. Hi, so welcome please our next speaker, Karen-Marie Kragelund. She's a multilingual, industry-agnostic transformation and change consultant. Based on 25 plus years of business experience, among other working at Deloitte, EPAM, and Ciklum, she serves as a project manager, advisor, and workshop facilitator on organizational transformation and development. Her topic today is how to build intentional plasticity into the organizational fabric. Please welcome.
Thank you very much, Anastasia. And that was quite an interesting presentation also from Aina. So it's a hard one to follow. And at the same time, I'm very aware that I have, let's say, the death slot, because now if everyone has been on since 10 o'clock, I think you are all in the time span where you're starting to look for lunch. And at the same time, hopefully I can keep your attention for another 45 minutes or so. I hope everything is fine with the screen. So instead of jumping into a very long presentation about myself, I would like to start with a story. So this picture here, it is a fine December day in 2005. And 1 year before this picture, I quit a well-paying, steady job in Copenhagen because I felt that after 5 years, there was no real future prospects, and it was just not really appealing to my purpose anymore. A year and a half after this picture, I was in the middle of the booming IT industry in Ukraine, and I was working harder than ever, and I was absolutely loving it because it felt like I was climbing Mount Everest mentally and having fun at the same time. 7 years after this picture, I was burned out. I was stuck in a mental tunnel, and I couldn't see my way out of it. And only friends and professional help were able to pull me back and pull me through that tunnel, so I came out on the other side. 13 years after this picture, I started my own business as an advisor and consultant on project management and organizational transformation. And then 24th of February happened. I was thrown back to square one, and it was a very uncomfortable place to be. And I ended up spending almost a year and a half in the Netherlands. And I'm very fortunate because I found a professional home with Deloitte that I learned a lot from. But the biggest joy was when on the 3rd of July this year, I moved back home to Kiev. And that's why I am very happy to be speaking to you all today from Kiev, my home. And please allow me for a short shout out to Sergei, who was my taxi driver this morning when I went to a meeting. I hope you managed to dial in and that you are with us now. And I truly believe that one day you will also be able to go home to Bakhmut. So what is my point with starting with this story? My point is that life is lived going forward, but we understand it when we are looking backwards. And what may look like incremental changes today, or large changes today for that matter, when you zoom out, you look at it in months, in years, or maybe even decades, then the change becomes amplified. And what I'm bringing to you today is the decades of my life that I have condensed into what I believe is the way forward for organizations. Let us take a quick step back to look at where are organizations actually today. Some of them are working on changing their structure. They are trying to move from organizations as machines to organizations as organisms. Some are pulsating between perspectives, zooming in, zooming out, looking at what they can achieve together, looking at what they can achieve apart, planning, doing, learning, you name it. I guess the best example coming from Denmark is Lego. Lego, I don't know if you're aware of it, but they are actually having a huge innovation department. 2.8 million customers are interacting in a hub called Lego Ideas. And the interaction that Lego is doing with their customers is mind-blowing. Some organizations are engrossed in technology. And as Aina just expertly showed us, ChatGPT is a tool that can do things that I didn't dream of when I started my work life. And if we are looking at what Brian Evergreen is describing as autonomous transformation, then it is this model of making sure that analog and digital are acting in symbiosis, becoming almost like an autonomous organism in itself, and using that to make changes to the products, processes, and structures. I highly recommend his book. Some organizations are looking also at the behavioral aspect, and they engage large consulting firms to help them with, let's say, culture change. And now, before anyone starts believing that, oh, Karen's got a beef with the big consulting companies, let me put things straight. I have got good friends that work with McKinsey. I was doing a global project with Accenture years ago, absolutely fantastic people. And as I mentioned in the beginning, Deloitte Netherlands in particular, the change team, they were my professional harbor last year, and really amazing people, smart people. But at the same time, we need to zoom out. Are we fixing something right here and right now? Or are organizations actually playing the long game? I'm sorry to say they don't. I have put in some lines here to make it easy for you to orient yourself. If you want to dig further into it, then I suggest looking into the World Economic Forum Future of Jobs that came out earlier this year. And when you look at statistics, they are interesting to look at. But at the same time, it's actually even more interesting what they are not saying, or rather, what is being said between the lines. So when I look at something like this, okay, AI and big data, creative thinking, leadership and social influence, all good. However, the ones that stand out to me is, why are so little companies putting focus on motivation and self-awareness? Why not curiosity and lifelong learning? Resilience, flexibility, and agility? That one in particular is one of my pet peeves, because I do not believe in resilience. I believe in anti-fragility, which is basically resilience 2.0. But the one that really blew my mind when I was looking at this one was systems thinking. Because if we are looking at fixing something, at optimizing something, we have to look at the bigger picture. If we are fixing something to the left, I dare you, there will be a lot of consequences down the line. So maybe if you are missing the right, you can end up fixing the wrong thing. And when you look at that in a perspective, holding it up against structure, perspective, technology, and behavior, then at least I'm starting to see a pattern. However, unfortunately, we are humans, we are biased, we do take mental shortcuts because time is short. We need to get something done now so we can deliver some return on investment, we can deliver some stakeholder value, and so on and so forth. Add more buzzwords as you please. However, let's take a step back and look at systems thinking. I believe that by applying a systematic approach to things, an infinity loop, then we will be able to find a way to approach organizational development that can structure itself and in the process create new structure, infinite learning, and opportunities that we can't see today, but they will emerge as the infinity loop keeps running. This system I call intentional cultural plasticity. It consists of two levels on the macro level. The individual, which is us as human beings, and the organization, which is the larger organism. And for each of these two, we have three components in order for that organism to be viable. We need water, we need nourishment, and we need light. And here, thankfully, I'm not an expert in biology because there are, of course, deep sea water creatures that don't need a lot of light, but that's a different story. So what we need to look at is how can we make these operate in symbiosis so they are mutually reinforcing each other. In order to understand that, let's take a step back, or rather a step deeper into what is meant by these components. So if we look at human vitality, it is physical health and it is also mental health. It is our sleep pattern. What is the quality? Let's be honest, right now, I also get woken up in the night when we have the air raid alerts. How we breathe. Are we breathing shallow, or are you actually taking deep breaths down into your stomach and thereby providing energy to all the little cells in your body? It's what we eat, both the quantity and the quality. But it's also how we engage socially. The good old extrovert versus introvert, been there, done that. I have become more introvert as I'm growing older, but sometimes it's the energy of being out among people, and sometimes it's sitting on the couch and thinking. And we have to be mindful of that. We have to listen to ourselves. Am I in the mood for this? And most importantly, it's about how we deal with emotions and emotional turmoil. Susan David is one of my go-to people with her concept of emotional agility. And she has this phrase where she's, let me paraphrase here, where it is not, I am sad, but more sadness is upon me. So looking at the emotion as not being you, but as something that is temporarily engaging with you. Maybe it's a bit philosophical for now, but I can recommend digging into her work. And as you can see here, I'm adding some books for you to dig into if you want to, because I am standing on the shoulders of giants in this one, as with all the others. Lifelong learning. It is how we learn. It is what we are looking to learn. Are we going deep or are we going wide? Are we a so-called T model or are we an M model? I don't know who came up with that, but whatever, if it works. It is how we take the knowledge that we have acquired and how we use it for our own good and for the greater good. But more importantly, I would say it's about our mindset. It is about how we are looking at the world and how we see ourselves gaining knowledge and paying it forward, again, to the greater good. And it's the mindset of, is it done to me, or is it done by me? It is taking charge. It is realizing and acknowledging that here I have a blind spot, discovering that you have a blind spot, and digging into it, using others around you and whatever resources you can find, including ChatGPT, of course, to expand your knowledge. Third component on the individual level is digital mindfulness. For many of you, you've grown up with technology. I'm a little bit older. I still remember how the world was before technology entered the scene. And I actually like to switch off from technology. And I don't know if it's still a trend, but some years ago, there was, let's say, a move away from smartphones. It became hype to have the old Nokia phones. I remember my first phone was a Nokia 1100. Absolutely loved it. The best feature was it had a flashlight. But it's also when you are letting critical thinking actually manage your mind, so to speak. When you allow critical thinking to actually rule over what you get from technology. Again, Aina very brilliantly described how to be critical in what ChatGPT is giving you. Funny example, for a workshop recently, I needed to translate some documents, some tools from English to Ukrainian. Now, my Ukrainian is okay, but it's not fantastic. So what do I go to? Google Translate. But looking at the text in Ukrainian, it was like, nah, there's something wrong here. So a little bit more research, trying to rephrase in English, found some other words in Ukrainian, one more time, checking online, does this look like a better word? And I found a much better translation, much more suitable word. So again, being mindful of what digital technology can do for us, but also still be critical. Having those three, looking at how we can stay vital, how we can make our mental and physical health be in balance so that we are able to identify when there is a need for learning and when there is, let's say, a motivation to learn. And using digital and technology and data for that to the extent necessary, then I believe the individual level is in balance. If we switch to the organizational level, psychological safety, I dare you, I think basically every one of you have heard about it. So I don't want to go into a lot of detail. Besides, it's all about communication. It's about how we react. It's about how we act. But it's also how we engage with others. Trust is a component that keeps coming up over and over. There are books over and over to be read about it. But it all boils down to being curious, being humble about what you know and what you don't know, and being authentic, speaking up. And that's why I put in here an article also about why we need dependable and not radical candor, because some of you may be familiar with Kim Scott's radical candor. I love the concept, but taking it one step further, dependable candor. Deliberately developmental. That took a while for me to learn how to pronounce. It's looking at how we are using the knowledge in the organization to develop the organization. How are we using turning a mistake into an opportunity? How are we practicing that? And mind you, this is not fuck up nights. It is not Friday afternoon, let's do a round table, share what went well, what didn't go well, and what we're going to use next week. It is being deliberately practicing, having a systematic approach. One example that you're probably familiar with, but I'll mention it anyway. You know sticky notes? These ones here? You know how they were invented? The guy who invented this glue, he was actually looking for the complete opposite. He was looking for a very, very strong glue. But what he came up with is what we know today as sticky notes. One of the best sellers of all time for 3M. Being deliberately developmental also means how an organization approaches development. Is it a process or is it a checkbox? How many of you have an LMS system? Rhetorical question. I think many of you operate with one. And when you go into the LMS system, there's probably, this is a learning path, this is the course, you need to do a checkbox, and then at the end of it, you get an exam, and maybe you get a certification. But once you get the certificate, does that mean you can do it? Not really. It is when you start applying it in actual life. That's where the learning is coming. So again, is it a process or is it a checkbox? It's also about how organizational communities are formed and engaged. And here I'm thinking in particular about how these communities are working in hierarchies. So if you look at, let's say, your surroundings in your current organizations, who are the ones you are talking to the most? Who are you engaging with? I think many of you are engaging mostly with peers on your own level. Hopefully I'm wrong, but that's my assumption. I believe that if the CEO and the cleaning lady, see, I'm even using that form, if they are talking, then they are both learning. Because in my experience from 10 years in the Ukrainian IT industry, it is the cleaning ladies and the drivers and the office managers that really know what is going on in the organization. All the things that you don't see. At the same time, there's one aspect that I haven't put in on the slide here, and I already alluded to it a little bit when I was saying I'm not a big fan of the word resilience. Because to me, resilience is mainly weathering the storm. It's like the oak tree. You know, it's standing strong and nothing is hurting it. Or at least if it gets hurt, it recuperates. I'm much bigger fan of the concept of anti-fragility. Because anti-fragility is taking that energy, whether it is negative or positive, mainly negative, and turning that into fuel that is bringing you forward. A bit like in bamboo. But again, I'm up against the majority here, so this is just my personal subjective opinion. The third aspect in the organizational parameter, so to speak, is values-based behavior. And by values, I understand that a lot of organizations have some beautiful values put on their webpage, maybe even in pamphlets, or put in the offices, or at least before COVID, and they are staying there, and that's all good. Not working. It is about how the organizational values are actually displayed and lived in an organization. One example that I would like to bring up here is actually a Danish company called Chr. Hansen. And they are a global leader in bioscience. And they have in their strategic manifest for 2025 a phrase, committed to driving diversity. Great. Earlier this year, Chr. Hansen withdrew as a partner for Copenhagen Pride. And the thing is, Chr. Hansen has a history of being a strong supporter for the LGBTQ plus rights community. And what happened was that 400 employees signed a letter of protest, and it made the news headlines, at least in Denmark, because those that had pushed Christian Hansen to withdraw, that was actually some American interest groups. So in order to please some stakeholders in the American market, Christian Hansen withdrew as a partner for Pride Parade in Denmark. That's a global company to you. But at the same time, it really hurt employees, and they felt psychologically safe or brave, whatever, to speak up. And unfortunately, Christian Hansen did not rejoin. And where the situation is right now, I don't know. But for me, that is such a great example of organizational values. Well, they can be compromised for some companies. What is also value-based behavior is when people on all levels are acting as role models. It is from the CEO to the cleaning lady, from sales to operations to IT to finance. If the organization has values, then unless everybody is actually acting as a role model, or at least holding others who are not acting as role models accountable, then they might as well just be on paper. Because if the organization is to feel as one organism, then it is a matter of taking the ins and outs, the pluses and the minuses, and weaving it all together, holding each other accountable. So if we take a step back, you always have to ask the right questions in order to identify the best answer. And there's no right answer. There's a best answer. There's no right answer. And in order to do that, we have to ask ourselves, what is the real problem that needs to be solved? Is this transformation meant to, as one project I was doing a while back, upgrade the capabilities of the HR business partners? Is that the real fundamental problem that we need to solve? It might be, but is that the whole problem? And when we have asked ourselves that question, then the next one obviously is, so how do we develop a structured solution that is self-organizing? And that is where I'm challenging people and organizations to look at it from an intentional plasticity perspective. And if right now you are sitting like this and saying, oh dear, what are we going to do? How are we going to attack this? I have one simple advice to you. Look at movement from a different angle. We don't have to be moving upwards in order to be moving forwards. And if to relate that to our reality right now, look at what all the international experts and news outlets have been saying about how it's going with our CESU. I think they're doing an absolutely bloody marvelous job. And if we keep supporting them, they will get the job done. I don't need some American expert to tell me this is going too slow. So let me finish off today by saying that we all fall at some point as an individual or as an organization. But the only way to move forward, one way or the other, is to step by step make our way back up on our feet again. As I said, today, this is the condensed version of a few decades of experience. But if you want to check out my professional credentials, you are very welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn and check out what I've done in my life. And yeah, I'm all open for your questions. Thank you.
Karen-Marie, thank you so much for your presentation. It was very interesting. Let's review some questions. So first would be, what would you categorize as the most difficult step for organizations in transformation?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, of course. What would you categorize as the most difficult step for organizations in a transformation?
That would be the human behavior change. Technology is much more simple. Pardon me if I'm stepping on some technology experts' toes right now, but technology change is much easier to map. Humans are quite unpredictable, and in my experience, it's convincing humans to letting go of what we have and helping them to embrace uncertainty and fear. That I see as the most difficult step in any transformation.
Great, and I see, the following follow-up question. Do you have a successful experience of transforming some organization from declaring some values to really having them?
I have to say the jury is out on that one. I know of projects that have started, and whether it will be successful, that is still to be seen. I have my hopes.
We also hope. How vendor or external consultant can impact client behavior or organizational structure changes? How vendor or external consultant may help and impact client behavior?
Well, I would say that the major positive aspect of my job is that I get to ask all the questions. I'm not entangled in, let's say, the internal political positioning. I'm not saying that's in every organization, but in many of those I work with, that has been a factor. And I'm coming with no prejudice. I am coming with curiosity, and I'm not a threat. So I would say that the main aspect is to ask the questions. And even if just the result is flushing out what people already knew, then that's an answer in itself. I'm working with a client right now, and at the very first meeting with the top management, I was saying, look, you have all the questions, you just don't know it yet. And that nailed it for them. And it's about being able to see things in the bigger picture, in a more systematic view, saying, okay, if you change things over here, it's going to have consequences over here. And when we are inside organizations, even the best of us tend to have tunnel vision. Been there, done that. So that I would say is the major benefit. And once you have flushed out what is, let's say, circulating around in the organization, you get it out on the table, then it's much easier to go into solution mode. Then, okay, how are we going to do it? You need to get all the visible and invisible Lego blocks out on the table.
And are you doing your own recommendations, or are you somehow brainstorming with C-level to cover those questions?
Both, because when they engage me, of course, they expect me to bring something to the table. But at the same time, they are sitting with all the institutional memory. So they will know, okay, what are the things that I can't see as an external? So it has to be co-creation. It's never, if I'm coming and saying as, I don't know, I'm not McKinsey, I'm not Deloitte anymore, I'm not Accenture. So that means, I don't have a huge organizational network behind me. And that means that, we co-create together. But at the same time, that is I see that as a great advantage, because that way change becomes incremental at the same time as they feel they are almost changing on their own. So the best job I've done is when I'm almost invisible. I'm just like nudging on the sides. And to some, that appeals to them, as my current client. And I also understand that other organizations may want, the Harry Potter with the magic wand. And that's okay. But then that's just not the organizations I'm supposed to work with. They let them go to McKinsey and others. That's fine.
Okay, thank you. And of course, some changes take less time, some more time. Do you check your companies with which you were working on with some time ago? Like, I don't know, 6 months ago, how they are, did they implemented those recommendations or not?
Yes, is the very short answer, because I'm now 5 years into my business. I still don't have a website because all my business has been word of mouth. So clients come back to me, which I think is humbling and a huge compliment, because that means I must be doing something right. And I'm in touch with a lot of them. Hopefully I will also be able to go to Odessa soon and catch up with some people I was working with on a major project some years ago. And it's never a quick fix. It's the long game. And this project that hopefully I'll see some guys in Odessa, was actually, I was delivery lead for Ukraine. And, when you're dialing in on a global call and this is Karen from Ukraine, then off we go. And what was interesting was that there was, without going into too much detail, there was a situation, and I just felt this one is going off the rails. It wasn't really within, let's say, the scope of what I was supposed to do, but I was just like, I can't sit still. I can't not say something. So I ended up sitting on a Sunday afternoon and writing a bit too long email, and basically stating out, okay, if I'm Ukrainian, then this is how I feel about these changes. Bullet points, and some fonts that were easy to read, so that, okay, very clearly, right? And then if I put on my Danish solution hat, this is how you can address it. And I sent it to the CEO, who thankfully was Danish, so he took it the right way, and also some others in the top management. It ended up circulating actually around quite a few people, and everybody loved it. And it was just like, oh, so that's how it's, for me, that was obvious, right? But again, it's about opening people's eyes. And the biggest compliment I got was actually from one of the grand old men in the company, saying, now we understand that organization better than we've ever done before. And this was 25 years after the foundation, right? So
it's great to hear.
You co-create, you work together, you ask questions, you come with your expertise, but you do not apply your own prejudice about, oh, things should be done like this. It's not going to work.
Yeah, but of course, not all those C-level people will accept the help, right? And open their eyes, even if.
True, but if they came in the first place, then they must be feeling there's something, going on. And, like the client I'm working with now, I was saying, I could see a need for some things, but I ask for permission. Are you interested if I do X, Y, Z? And yeah, of course, sometimes you do something and then you ask for forgiveness afterwards, like that email, which thankfully worked out fine. But in some cases, you just thread a little bit more lightly and you ask, okay, would you be interested if I'm providing my perspective on this? And then, of course, stating, I can be wrong because I don't have the institutional memory that you have. But by putting it down on paper and maybe just, triggering their thinking process, again, the long game.
Yeah, I understand. Next question was, how would you approach human change with focus to long-term goals, and how would you suggest establishing psychological safety and how to deal when attempts fail?
Okay, that was kind of 3 questions.
Yeah.
Let's take psychological safety first. It starts with you. It starts with the person in the mirror. And it's about what you say, walking the talk. If you really mean it, then do it. And one of the things that I've been very careful about in my time was to use the word promise. Because if I promise something, then come hell or high water, you have to deliver. And if it's not within your, let's say, capacity to deliver, if you are dependent on others, then you can say, I'm going to try and make it work, but don't promise. So again, the words that you're using. What was the second part about after psychological safety?
How to deal with attempt that didn't
didn't fail. That didn't succeed. Call it out and celebrate that someone failed, that you can learn from it. It's as I know I said, it's not fuck up nights, but kind of it is. It is celebrate that, okay, things went wrong. Yoo-hoo, we found a mistake before our customers did. And of course, if the customers are involved, then take the customer seriously and saying, acknowledge that something happened that wasn't supposed to happen, fix the situation right now, and then use it for improving afterwards. I had a situation way back, and we had not managed to get something arranged on time. And the CEO for the client came to Kiev, and it was like, uh-oh, all man on deck, we have to sort this out. And it was, 8 o'clock in the evening. What can you do? Yeah, it was my office manager who had sorted out the situation. We had worked on it together. But I went there, and when I greet him, welcome to Kiev, that's what you do. You sort it out, you turn the mood around. But depending on the urgency, I would say you need to find, sometimes if it's urgent, find the quick fix, but then don't storm ahead afterwards. When things have calmed down a little bit, then take a step back and then look at what on earth happened here, so that you're turning it into a learning opportunity. And that also, again, it fits and it feeds together with psychological safety. And I would like to add to that also that it's, especially if you are in the higher echelons of an organization, it is so important to lead by example, be the role model. I know one organization that is actually, I would almost say that they are using this concept that I have outlined here. And the reason why I know it is because it's Danish management, and it's based here in Ukraine, and they are about 80 people. The owners or founders are, we look at things very much similar way. And when I'm in the office with them, and even the owners are not there, the guys are sharing with me and we are talking, and I can feel that, that this, it's not just, pakasuka. It's actually preaching and living at the same time. So I don't know if that answers the question or if I missed an aspect.
Yeah, of course, transparency, post-mortem analysis, like kind of retrospective, and learning your lessons and improving continuously. That would be key for me as well.
Yeah, call it out and don't point fingers, because again, one small thing, if you're pointing fingers at someone, there are 3 pointing towards yourself.
I mean, we always are a team, and all our failures and successes are common, definitely. Did it happen in your career that your values were different from the values of the company for which you were working for?
Yes.
And how is challenging? How did you go with it?
I ended up leaving. It was, when you start in a company, all excited and yes, and running fast, and this is fantastic, and colleagues are great, and the job is even more interesting. And then after a certain time, depending on the company, depending on the person, it comes within a few months, it maybe comes within a year or longer. It's all individual. Then, let's say the work starts becoming, let's say, not a routine, but it becomes known. You kind of know how to navigate. And when you reach that stage, then you get your mental bandwidth becomes freed up a little bit so that you are able to, let's say, take a step back and look at, is this really resonating with me? I can, if I look back at my career, it's becoming easier and easier for me to recognize. The first job I had was for more than 5 years in a law firm in Copenhagen. And, the span was becoming shorter and shorter for when I'm able to recognize if there is, let's say, congruence between my values and the company's values. And maybe that's why I feel very comfortable being my own boss today. So, yeah, but it's up to you as an individual to, let's say, to decide what to compromise on, and what is important for you. And maybe values is not something that's important to you if you are, I don't know, making $300 a month. Then it's just a job because I need that money so I can feed my family, maybe. So it's I fully realize that this values-based behavior that can be like fluffy mumbo jumbo for those, let's say, juniors that are just, I just need to make money so I can feed my family, right? Totally get it. But it's unique.
Understand. You mentioned also resilience 2.0, and I do not remember the exact word that you used. May you please little share more about
Sure.
that?
Yeah, it's anti-fragility. So an anti-fragile organization. It's coming from I think it's coming from software development, actually, that you are deliberately stress testing the system. Where will it break? And in order to flush out the mistakes and the issues, the bugs, call it whatever, so that you can improve the system. And the way I interpret it, as I said, the picture that I have is resilience, that's the oak tree, and anti-fragility, that's the bamboo. So whenever you're going through the storm, then a bamboo will be swaying, using the energy to actually get stronger and stronger roots, whereas the oak tree can handle only so much. And eventually, if the weather is hard enough, and if the storm is strong enough, then the oak tree may fall, and then it's fallen, and the roots may be broken, so you can't raise the oak tree up again. But it's the author is called Taleb, Taleb, and he's written a book called Anti-Fragility. I recommend looking into it.
Well, thank you so much. We have one more question here, I see. If you have got a choice where one person has got a really good hard skills, a very good expert in specific domain, but quite stubborn at the same time. On the other hand, flexible person from human perspective, but knowledge-wise, far from what you need for the task, basically. Who would you prefer and why? Have you got a rule of thumb for such use case? And thank you in advance.
Okay. I would almost say that's a trick question, but I will be straight and say I would prefer the second person. But with the caveat that you need to invest also into the first person. Meaning, I'm the firm believer that you can learn hard skills faster than you can learn soft skills. And now I'm calling soft skills because I know that's what most people use to refer them to. I prefer personally human skills. And human skills is it's that, intangible feeling, sensing, when is the right moment to do things. Unfortunately, as we saw from World Economic Forum's statistics, there's more focus on the hard skills because they are easier to quantify than human skills are. And I hope that organizations will start putting more effort and focus on learning human skills and developing human skills. Because look at ChatGPT, an excellent example. Technology is coming, the metaverse is coming, and whatever, right? The machines will be able to do small, mediocre tasks, or that may probably already be old wording. What technology can do today is mind-blowing. And the only thing that sets us apart from the machines, that's the human aspects, that's the human skills. So coming back to Brian Evergreen's framework, human and technology, it has to work together. So to come back to the question, personally, I prefer the one with the higher human skills because technical skills can be taught and learned. But at the same time, I think there is a key to every human being. So if to spend more time on the person with the super technical skills, that person can develop as well. It just takes longer. So it depends on the context that you have. And also to what extent do you want to compromise on, let's say, if he's got really, negative behavior, or what are the aspects that, are how bad are they, for lack of a better description? And how can you modify it? How can you create an environment around him, or her for that matter, or they, to make sure that it is not spreading toxic behavior to the rest of the company? Because if you have, let's say, a C-level guy who's behaving like an idiot, that's going to set precedent. The person is a role model, whether the person likes it or not. And then it's a matter of, can the organization deal with that? Is it sustainable in the long run? And an example, values-based is as an organization. Now I know I'm going beyond the question here, but again, take McKinsey. Now I don't have beef with McKinsey, let me be honest, be straight with that, but you may have read about the opioid scandal in the US. And McKinsey has paid, I think they have been sentenced to something like $1 billion or something in fines by now, because they were engaged by the medical companies to boost sales. And when at the same time you got McKinsey saying, we are an ethical company on their webpage, and they are helping figuring out how can you boost sales for a medical company, which then has consequences down the line that you have got so many Americans on opioids, then something is wrong. Putting profit above everything. I think even the CEO didn't get re-elected for the next term because of some, the partner payout was smaller. But again, it's just one example. There's plenty of them.
But what are key points to develop these human skills? Willing, first of all, I guess, and then books.
Curiosity.
And
Be curious.
Experience, right?
Sorry?
Plus experience. I believe, many soft skills can be developed only based on experience, no?
Yeah, jump into it. Be curious. And I don't, I'm not an Apple fan, but Steve Jobs did have his moments. So be bold, be curious. it's about asking questions. One of my rule of thumbs is that there's a reason why we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use that ratio. Well, right now I'm doing most of the talking, but still, it's listen to what other people are saying.
And based on this example that Igor mentioned in the chat, with a stubborn person, probably, as you mentioned, to put some attention to him, but the key would be still his willing to develop, right? Like
finding the key. If he is stubborn, okay, that's what you see. But again, the iceberg, you see him being stubborn. What is underneath the surface? Where does that stubbornness come from? Maybe he is, I don't know, deep down he's insecure because for various reasons, he feels the need to nastaire on I am right all the time. And that you see as him being stubborn. But it's actually some much more basic, fundamental internal triggers that are, let's say, making him act like that. But unless you are able to, let's say, take a step back, breathe, and actually look beyond that stubbornness. I was working with a CEO some years ago, entrepreneur, very, what's the word? Volatile emotionally, let's say it that way. And at the same time, very engaging and very on, And I remember him asking me, so how are you going to handle it if I must start yelling? I'm going to go quiet and start listening, start asking, figuring out what is triggering you. And it's all about the ability to look beyond what you see. And I totally get it that, when we are running so fast as we have to do today to be on top of things, and moreover, the reality we are living in Ukraine, we have to get things done now. Then that's difficult. Totally get it. But it is the way forward.
Yeah, agree. Very insightful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for presentation and for nice discussion. So I'm